podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Cardiff Central Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cardiff Central Podcast. I'm Harley in the hot seat and joined by a full crew this time, Dan and Carwyn. How you doing, gents?
All good, Tap.
Yeah,
thank you, Carwyn, for again making a hand gesture instead of speaking on a main audio pod.
Dan go first. No, good.
After saluting. So another mixed bag for Cardiff. The Rags won. We somehow continue our weird losing streak at home to the Turks, probably because half of them live next door. Jez, how do you feel about the game on Saturday?
Frustrated, probably a word. Don't know if Dan's got a better word, but that's probably the first word that comes to mind.
Yeah, I think that was disappointed as well, but mainly frustrated that it was there to be won and we didn't win it, pretty much.
Yeah, it was definitely a game where you look back at it and you go, you've got to give, not reluctly, got to give Scarlets credit, especially when three of them were in my household when I got home. But you've got to give them credit, especially for the fact that they played the big moments and they won the big moments. You look at, the Blair Murray's tackle on Hamer Webb's probably an obvious one there. The Plumtree turnover, the scrums, certain penalties there. They won the big moments. They capitalised on the big moments. They probably, decisions-wise, it was probably a bit 50-50 because, yes, they had a forward pass, but we were discussing pre-pod whether or not that's a penalty try is another question. But I think there were lots of things in that game that Jockey will look back on and go, we should be better. And I think that would be the frustration. But yeah, I think it's a positive thing for Welsh rugby in terms of Scarlets being closer than I expected them to be this season. But yeah, from a Cardiff's perspective, definitely a frustrating one.
Yeah, and I think Carmen's exactly right saying about the big moments, and those are the list, the Scarlets one, and then you can list, for Cardiff, 3 times we should have scored immediately after half time. We have the coughing the ball up in contact and getting turned over. And then do we have 3 or 4 chances once we finally got into the Scarlets 22 when they had 13 men. Obviously, even when they go straight down to 30 men, we knock on immediately in our own 22. And over the last few weeks, particularly away at Scarlets, a bit at home to Zebra, and then in the second half against Glasgow, we were winning a few of those moments and giving ourselves a chance and getting points on the board. We just didn't do that on Saturday, essentially. Particularly those 3 opportunities in the Scarlets 22 straight after half time. We blow them, concede 2 penalties, and next thing you know, Johan Lloyd's wriggled under Josh McAnally and they're under the sticks. And at that point, you're chasing. And Cardiff, we're not a great chasing team. We're not a great team playing against sides who've had yellow or red cards as well. I don't really remember us ever in the last, well, certainly over the last 10 years, sort of going through a period where every time the opposition go down to 14 or 13, and you'd go, oh, we'll definitely score here, because we just seem to put this massive pressure on ourselves to immediately capitalise. You look in that spell against 13 men from 65 to 75 minutes. When we did get the ball back eventually, we're desperately trying to get the ball out wide when it's not even really on. We're desperately trying to make the last pass if we do get into that wide channel to capitalise on it. You don't need to do that. You can just attack in the same way, be patient. The other team will run out of legs and they will run out of men eventually. You don't have to force things all the time. But I thought it was a little bit around. I thought we looked a little bit leggy in the second half, where we've had a lot of lads who played a lot of minutes, and obviously a couple of the older guys as well. We had to leave them on, really. A couple of injuries dictated the way we were making our subs. And then I think it probably speaks to how we're still adapting to the attack with the new players that we've got. Spoke about it a few weeks ago on the pod, but we are a slower team now. We have the players that we're picking at the moment are slower than some of the guys who have left or who are not available. I think you go through the list. You have Sed Davis, Alex Mann, Thomas Young, Mackenzie Martin, James Botham, and then Thomas Williams were all quick, fast, high tempo players. And the guys who've come in are not bad players, but Josh McAnally, Dan Thomas, James Botham, Ali Davis, they're just not as quick. Naturally, they're not quick people as those guys who are missing are. So we're adapting to attacking, still playing this expansive style of play whilst not being as quick as we were. So yeah, disappointing, but there was quite a strong reaction at full time on social media. I thought a lot of people sort of getting stuck into the performance and to individuals and coaches. I didn't think it was. I've certainly seen Cardiff play a lot worse than that, and I'd be a lot more worried if we weren't in the position to win it. If we were miles off and we weren't in that last 5-10 minutes, basically camped in the Scarlets territory, just figuring out how we should be able to win it. I'd be more concerned if we were, stuck in our own half with nowhere to go. So yeah, it's disappointing, frustrating, just not clinical enough on the day. But I don't think it's like massive panic stations. We're never going to win another game again type thing.
Just quickly on the first of all, Dan mentioning the criticism online of individuals. One of them was criticism of Hamer Webb, which I think Dan and I assume Harley as well, but all agree that sort of not his fault, that one. One, it's a very good tackle by Blair Murray, and two, possibly the play before that should have been slightly better. But I do think a little bit of the frustration is when Dan's talking about playing against 14 or 13 men, that moment was against, I can't remember, I think it was 13 at the time. And you take that opportunity and you're probably looking at it going, oh, well, Cardiff have scored 14 points while they're down, while Scarlets are down a man, which is very good, by most metrics. So I see Dan's point. I do think wider to Wales. You look back at when Wales have been up against 14 and 13 men, we've been really, really poor. Even actually, if you can take that for men's and women's teams, you're looking back to Wales women against Australia last year. But I think it's one of those where I saying at the start that it's down to big moments is often, you talk about it as a cliche, but I really think in this case it's not. I think this case was that one is Ben Thomas, brilliant player, done brilliantly to make the break, but needs to fix the player a little bit better or give it earlier to Hamer Webb and wait for the pass back. Yes, it's still a brilliant tackle by Blair Murray. I'm not taking away from that. But there's other little moments that the lack of the shoulder from Ed Byrne in that ruck, that's a guy who's probably not been on the pitch that long, really. And he started. I forgot. He has been on the pitch quite a long time, and perhaps is getting tired. But also, it's that he's come from a lens of the system that don't make that mistakes. Those are the sort of mistakes that you do not make in your own half. You put your ruck you put your shoulder into the ruck and make sure you stay attached. I just feel like that was a side that had fallen into the traps possibly of last season of finding ways to not win a game. Whereas this year it's been a lot more positive, being, the Glasgow result apart, definitely being in games, definitely being competitive, mostly, mostly being in the game to win it.
Yeah, a couple of things. So, the problem with the way, and I discussed this on Wrap, if you look at how Cardiff were playing in their attack, it was getting it to the wing as wide as possible. So Scarlets, when they were down a man, when it was Lousy or, when it was both Rodgers and McLeod, they were getting it to it. So all the Scarlets had to do was hard drift, and they covered it, basically. There was not really anything for them to defend, really. And, really maybe it should have been a few more punches up the middle. As you said, Dan, just getting them to run out of things. I mean, ironically, the second Harry Millard try is actually that, but that actually comes off that was basically a 12-point try for Harry for Cardiff, because, Harry Millard saves, does that try saving tackle, we get the turnover on Plumtree, and then they piggyback some penalties, and then, we have a quick play and we go through. But even then, it was really hard work getting to that point, because there were we had quite a few chances to make that. Where basically we had the penalty, we cock up somewhere, we get it back, we get another penalty, and so on. For me, one of the big differences when you look at it, like you can, both teams had one great chance of scoring a try, say done by a try saving tackle. Both missed a conversion. The big one for me is Cardiff just point blank refused to take any points, and Scarlets did, and those points were it on a day when neither side were attacking particularly well. And actually, I think it was a theme across all four Welsh sides. Actually, I don't think anyone was attacking particularly brilliantly. I don't think Scarlets worked particularly hard for their 2 tries. Their 3 tries. I mean, the Johnny Williams one was just, well, we're gonna have 2 big lads run at Callum Sheedy, and he sort of can't make the hit. Yeah, it's a bit. I mean, to bring up Harry Millard again. If you could give a player of the match award for one half of rugby, he deserved it, because that first half was absolutely fantastic from him. I think pretty much everything he did was great.
Yeah, he just nailed on player of the match first half, wasn't he? That's you listening to it on comms, that's exactly what they were saying. That tackle on Plumtree, he does come out of nowhere. I assume, I haven't listened to the Scarlets pod, but I assume if they're probably saying a similar thing that I was saying earlier about the Hamer Webb non-tries, that possibly Plumtree should do slightly better. But it is a brilliant tackle from him. The line, the one that I'm really impressed with was the line off the Dan Thomas offload. I thought that was brilliant. That was, and don't shoot me for saying it, but Ashton-esque. It reminded me of sort of prime Ashton 2011, sniffing around for tries, timing your run perfectly, and then finishing it off with aplomb. And I thought that was perfect. And then, he has a run in for the second one, but what a half of rugby. And there's other points where I will feel vindicated on this pod, but perhaps a little bit of humble pie. I've questioned whether centre or wing's his right position, but he seems to be absolutely nailing it at wing at the moment. And fair play to him, and fair play to Jockey for sticking with it.
Well, Dan, you're the other end of that coin. You're the other side of that coin. You argue that he's more a winger than a centre. So, what do you make of Harry's performance?
I've never doubted his attacking ability at either position, really. But I think same for Grady at times as well. The beauty of that try as well as the line off the offload, is that he gives the pass at first receiver initially, and he's come in off the left wing and stood there. And I think maybe we probably don't do this enough at all at Cardiff, is to give those players the license to roam like that and just sort of slot in around them. Grady does it at times, but not always. That's the first time I've seen Millard do it. I'd like to see Winnett do it a lot more as well, and just sort of appear wherever they fancy. And if you put the forward structure in, which Cardiff generally have quite a good structure of forwards in attack, particularly when we'll get a few guys back like Young and Mann and stuff, who give us a bit of pace out wide, where we can stretch the opposition a bit. I think I'd like to see those guys really, because really taking the game by the scruff of the neck. And Sheedy and Thomas, or De Beer and Thomas at 10 and 12, more than capable of slotting in a bit wider, and will be quite happy to do that as well. That they seem to, whether we're either 10, Thomas can dovetail quite nicely with them. Lilo has got more than enough experience to sort of slot in wherever, really, outside centre, and do a pretty good job. So, yeah, I'd really like to see us being more fluid again with our back three. Because, when we do get wide, we tend not actually to break down the wide channels much with our wingers. We rarely sort of keep a defence narrow, spin it wide, and score from midfield. We do that a bit more in the red zone. So if we're going to score, if we're going to make a line break, it's going to be through midfield when we're sort of 30 to 40 yards out. So might not get your danger men and your pace guys running at some more tired legs, or trying to pop up for an offload, rather than sticking out to the wing, and you end up looking a bit Adam Radwan at Newcastle-esque, where you never actually get the ball.
It's an interesting one, because I almost feel the fluidity that Ben Thomas offers you at 12 slightly hampers it, in sense of you've already got your 2 playmakers, your 2 first receiver options to some extent. And then someone like Cam, who is really good at stepping in at first receiver, or perhaps doesn't feel as comfortable doing it because he knows that, or perhaps knows he's got a slightly different role because of the fact that you have Benny and you've got a De Beer or a Callum. I think certainly with De Beer, there's more license for different players to pop in, just because De Beer's got that extra possibly yard of pace just to get on the outside in that 13 channel a bit more. We saw it a lot last season actually, of him popping out around the centres. I think that's the interesting thing with that. I think the big one is it's it's a big question for Wales and for Cardiff is how do you get the best out of Grady, because there were times where he was brilliant. The bowling ball, I think that's been captured today, of him running through Tom Rogers, was brilliant. That's where you want to see him on that outside arc. The same move pretty much that he helped set up that Mackenzie Martin try against Glasgow. But that happened twice against Scarlets, and bearing in mind Scarlets were down to 13 men, as we pointed out. How do you get the best out of the best athlete on the field? At times it sounds as simple as just giving the ball, but Cardiff clearly aren't quite nailing it at the moment, similar to how Wales aren't quite nailing it. And that's not just a team thing or a tactics thing. That's a Grady thing as well. He needs to learn to find that ball in the best positions for himself to create the most chaos. If it was, you look back at when Shane Williams was the best player in the world, he was picking up the ball at first receiver to score against Ireland. He was picking up the ball on the back of pods to pre-pods. They weren't really pods back then, were they? But he's picking up the ball at different positions in order to impact the game. And I think that's what Grady needs to learn to do, because running at dead straight against Eddie James and Johnny Williams wasn't going to work. So where can you impact it? Well, I didn't see him run once through Blair Murray. And if I was to look at a mismatch on the field, I would think, okay, yeah, Blair Murray made a brilliant cover tackle, but I would have thought that would be one. I would have thought Johan Lloyd up against Grady would have been a mismatch. I would have thought, Tom Rogers in that instance obviously was, but these are the sort of players that he needs to find a way of targeting, but also those, if he can find a way of getting around the outside of those front five forwards, that's another way as well. I've caught Harley mid-cough there with my end of my point. Sorry, Harley.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I agree with Grady. One thing when you talk about that bowling ball thing is what the other thing is, because he's arced across so much width, actually you see that the two players outside of him who he's going to pass to are now in like the 5 meter channel. And we're almost doing the opposite. We're compressing ourselves and not the defence. Because sometimes, and it's the sort of thing that like coaches yell at their teams from minis and juniors all the way up to international levels. I actually disagree. I don't think he necessarily needs to run at the obvious choices like the smaller back. I'd like to see him targeting big forwards more, because I think big forwards think they can take him and then he powers through. And I think some of his best busts have come up in the midfield. Now, I'm not saying that means he needs to be a 12, because I feel like when you're at 12, everyone's expecting that 12 carry. It is that sort of late pot. You almost want him. I don't want to give two secrets as 7, but you basically want like your typical pod, your 3 forwards distribute each other, but and you almost want him coming through, a bit like how Ireland were trying to get round South Africa's defence. Is he basically blasts through the middle of a pod, and he's almost like a second tip. Becomes this sort of inside tip. Basically a tip inside the tip, and then cuts through there, and and just catching people off guard. Whether or not you can get it to work, because it's something we've tried, and the timing. Like getting the timing is ridiculously difficult.
I'm really sorry, Harley, but are we still running with the tip inside the tip? Because even as a 28-year-old man, I find that one of the most euphemistic things I've ever heard.
Look, this is just the way. Considering what Old Pens are known for, which I've found out since agreeing to play for them. Play is a very loose word. I'll be honest, tip inside the tip is the least of my concerns. Right now Carwyn's derailed the pod, because if it's not me on the Magic Roundabout, it's got to be Carwyn finding euphemisms everywhere. Dan, do you want to bring us back into some sort of sense?
I don't know how you follow tip inside tip. Trying to think of something vaguely sensible to say on the back of that. Um,
Teddy Williams had another very good game.
Teddy Williams was good. I thought I think one thing I would say actually, just to maybe for Jockey to consider after the game, was that I thought he went to the bench too late for some of the tactical guys. He waited until the Scarlets went down to 13 to sort of bring both them Mac and on what together. I'd have maybe liked to have seen those guys come on a little bit earlier and have a bit more of a run. I obviously don't know how fit both of them is or isn't, but Mac's been playing pretty well recently. I thought Alan Lawrence battled hard and was was sort of slugging away with for little reward really on the day, and that maybe hooking him a little bit earlier might have been a little bit more sensible. But yeah, Teddy was very good. I thought Dav Hughes was good off the bench, coming on a bit earlier, considering it's only like his third competitive game for Cardiff, and he's been here pretty much 12 months now. But yeah, he's going to have quite a lot of game time over the next 2 to 3 months. So it's encouraging to see him looking fit, working hard, looking quite physical as well around the park, and line-out throwing was good. And then I just thought Lilo looked like somebody who finally did need a break. I know we've been saying it every week in the team selection, but it's finally got to the point now where I think, yeah, we'll do team selection for Edinburgh a bit later. But I hope to God that Jockey just says to him, "Let's stay at home this weekend, fella, and rest up for Ulster," because
Maybe you continue Nick Williams and doesn't leave Wales.
Yeah, that's fine. Even dragging him up there as a travelling reserve would feel harsh at this point, I think.
Cohen, any other points other than things that snigger in the back of the classroom on the game, or shall we move on?
No other tips for Jockey. I think I think I if you look at it so far as a few games, I think there's a lot of positives improvements from last year and individuals performing well at times. It's not quite cohesive enough yet. I think that's the big one. I think you would expect that with the turnover that Cardiff have had. I know perhaps it's not the turnover that other regions have had, but it's big players and it's those big positions, scrum half. The way Thomas was key to how they played, especially with Bevan coming back late. I think it's important to note that there's still a lot of development to go in this side, but over the next couple of months, I think Cardiff really need to kick on, because that did have a little bit of last season feeling about it in terms of coming within 7 points and not coming up off with a win. So I do feel that Cardiff have turned a corner at the start of the season. I'm very hopeful that it continues to be that way and that it's not a sign of things to come, but rather than an anomaly, which I always struggle with, for the rest of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you agree there, Dan?
Yeah, we have to get back. And I don't think we will get back this weekend, probably. But I think losing to Glasgow and Scarlets now puts big old emphasis on that Ulster game at the end of the month. Like if we were to lose 5 in a row going into, would it be 5 in a row? How many we lost in the moment?
2 in a row.
2 in a row. So yeah,
if we lose to Edinburgh, it'd be 3 in a row.
If we lost to Ulster, then with 4 losses in a row, 3 of them at home going into that international break, yeah, there's going to be difficult to sort of dig any real positivity out of that. So yeah, I think this weekend now is a chance to get some lads up to speed, probably who haven't played much, either through injury or just not being selected. Give Jockey some headaches going into that Ulster game, and then yeah, it's Ulster not in a bit of a tough spot at the moment, sort of where they are off the field, and I think we have to be circling that one in big old permanent ink, saying we really need a win there to go into the international break.
Yeah, I mean, when we're looking at the start of the season, talking about the fixtures, I mean, to get into the playoffs is not actually have to be. Basically, win your home games and your return fixture, your away fixture, a couple of your away derbies. And we've lost 2 games at home now, so that's 2 extra wins we've got to find on the road. All right, yes, we beat Scots away, but I mean, the positive is, if you look at the equivalent fixtures last year, we're still 7 points up on where we lost last year. The problem was we were about 12 points off the chasing pack to get into the playoffs, never mind being in the playoffs. And I don't think, even this game against Edinburgh is, there's pressure to get something on it. and I'll do it. I The good thing is all the first three fixtures we got try bonus points. This is the one we dipped, and we've only scored three tries, which based on last season, actually only scoring three tries is still pretty good. After talking about how naff our attack was, yeah, I think, yeah, I think, should we go on to Edinburgh and push that? I was, a couple of weeks ago, I was thinking, do you know, actually, this is quite a winnable game because Edinburgh really struggling. They've gone through there. The game against the Stormers, however, is making me question that one a little bit because it almost feels like they've had just enough of a boot up their arse to give a shit again.
Yeah, it's almost like they were 48-0 at half time and then decided, all right, guys, we can't keep playing like that we are for the rest of the season, wasn't it, against Lions? Yeah, I think I do still think it's winnable. It's just what sort of team are going to go up there? What sort of team Edinburgh are going to have available? I think that's the big question. Obviously, for those who don't know, we record this on a Wednesday, so team news hasn't come out. But the situation, what was suggested post match by Jockey, you see what's happened at Ospreys, where there's a number of Wales internationals not going to be available for their trip. I think it could be a similar situation for Cardiff. So if that is the case, and Jockey shuffles the pack, you'd expect, speaking of cohesion and players stepping in for other people, you'd expect a certain amount of disjointedness, maybe to some extent, even though we know that Jockey's got everyone, it's quite clear how that succession plan works in Jockey systems and how everyone seems to have a plan of fitting into a role, following in a position. For instance, if Ben Thomas doesn't start, we know there's another 12 option that's going to be exactly the same as him. We know there's other players, for instance, Thomas Young will slot in probably if he's fit, and so I think there's a lot on team selection this week, but also Edinburgh out in Scotland on a different proposition. So I think that could be a difficult proposition to handle, even though the weather here isn't particularly great. So it's probably exactly the same weather as we'd be going up to. But yeah, I still don't think it's a loss game. I don't think it's a game where you go, oh God, this is a too strong a team to take on, because Edinburgh clearly aren't the side they were March, April time last year, where they were tearing it up. They're a little bit behind that, to say the least. Or last season, I should say, rather than last year.
Anything you want?
I've watched exactly 0 minutes of Edinburgh this year. So I can offer you very little insight into Edinburgh at all. I think, yeah, we are obviously going to take a change team up there. Cameron's right that it might struggle to hit the ground running. I suppose the opposite side, but hopefully the opposite is that there's not a huge amount of pressure on them. The boys that go out there, there's places to be won. There's opportunities to impress before international squads are named next week. And if they, it's a pitch that we're relatively familiar with, being artificial. If we can hit the ground running early doors, which we haven't done very well this season. We haven't got off to many flyers, but if we can do that and score early and put Edinburgh under a bit of pressure, then we know from the last sort of 18 months, so we're pretty good at hanging in games. Very few games have got away from us at any point in that time. But I think potentially the issue will be that we'll take a slightly lighter pack up. We'll lose a little bit of a physical edge, and Edinburgh sort of generally are pretty strong in that area, even when they're struggling in comparison to their neighbours of Glasgow. And that, I think it's likely that they'll name a relatively strong team on the basis that I assume their Scottish internationals will go into camp and so won't be playing, because they're playing on that very first weekend of November, Scotland, aren't they? They've got an out of window test, which Wales don't have. So it's likely that
for a long time.
Yeah. So it's likely that the Scottish boys won't be coming. I think they're playing Ospreys in Swansea next week, the following week then. So likely that the Scottish lads won't be travelling down for that one, so that they'll get their last sort of couple of pennies worth out of them this weekend before changing things up to play the Ospreys. So yeah, it'd be a tough one this weekend. Don't massively foresee us getting much out of it. I think it would be very impressive to get a win there, but if we can just show a bit of progression in the attacking game, look a bit more clinical, because we're going to have to be clinical. We're not going to have as many 22 entries this week as we did last week. And most importantly, I think just no soft tries, like make them earn any tries that they're going to get. Like, obviously we know about the Glasgow ones. There was one or two, like I thought, particularly the Gareth Davies' second one where Lloyd goes under McNally, but also Davies' first one as well, where Johan Lloyd sort of with a latch drives us back sort of 10 to 15 yards in one tackle. That shouldn't be happening. So if we can bring a bit more edge, bring a bit more pace, and if we can bring a couple of lads back with that intensity to the line speed, then that's what I'll mainly be looking for this weekend before getting caught up in any scoreboard watching, I think.
Yeah, if you just said that Lloyd was going to win player of the match from the moment that he's tackled with De Beer and the moment that McNally's clearly got him wrapped up, you'd probably think that's not happening. But so those, as Dan says, talking about moments again, those were key moments. But from an Edinburgh perspective, just Muncaster scored 2 tries on the weekend. I'm quite excited to see him. I must be honest. Like Dan, I've seen very little of Edinburgh this season. He looks one hell of a prospect. Well, he's not that young anymore, but he's a talented boy, and someone I'm excited to see.
Yeah,
Sorry,
absolutely.
not really adding anything from a Cardiff perspective, but watch out for him, I suppose.
I mean, the Edinburgh coach has come under a lot of fire, managed to pull that thing out. What I would say is, last time that particular coach was under fire and Cardiff came to visit, it came quite well. It's definitely not going to happen again. And I imagine this coach has a point. Will want to have a point to prove against us. I mean, even last year at
who is it?
I forgot. The problem is I forgot his name. It's the former Sharks coach who got sacked the day after when we beat them 35-0.
Oh, Sean Everett.
Sean Everett, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I imagine he's got a point to prove.
Oh, is he the one that we nilled out there? Is that who he is? Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then got sacked the next day.
Harley, you've convinced me we're winning. That's fine.
Yeah, I imagine history is not repeating itself there. I think it's a bit more wary. One thing I do want to point out is they've been once again, Jamie Ritchie's been excellent over the ball. I mean, as he is anyway, and I think Cardiff has been very soft at the ruck, so we've given away quite a few soft turnovers, particularly when against teams at dual open side. So that's something we're going to have to be a little bit more on point with. And so that's that. Shall we go into team selection?
This will be the who's left standing team selection.
Yeah.
Do you have a hat for me to throw names up in the air?
Yeah, I was going to say, what's the best way to do this? Do you want to just go one down all the way down to 23 with these, or shall we just pick people we think, pick the sort of nailed on people who are probably going to play because there's no one else?
We can go 1 to 23.
Yeah. Okay.
So Domachowski didn't quite make the game last week, but presumably fit. Does he come back in, or do you give Ed Byrne or Danny Southworth the start?
I expect one of those two would start, surely. If we're talking about Wales internationals that go in, I'd expect one of those two starts.
I do want to caveat this with we're assuming that Wales internationals are being told they're not allowed to go.
I don't know if because Dom has missed 2 weekends now, he's exempt from, because he didn't play round 1 either, did he? If he's exempt from that, and that actually it'll probably be in the interest of Mr. Gatland and co for him to play this weekend. I think if Dom is available, he does start this weekend.
Yeah, it's sort of the logic I was thinking.
I have a feeling that they probably maybe could have pushed him last weekend, but they've chosen not to in order to play him this weekend, potentially.
Sounds good. And listen, you don't want to have too much, basically, it's too much of a just throw the kids out. Or throw the kids in the home guard out.
I think either way, I'd keep Southworth in the 23.
I thought he actually was very good off the bench.
Yeah,
There
I
was
think
a
I think
decent
he's
impact, Karen.
stays involved, and I think he's somebody who actually, with a little bit of game time, like regular game time and a bit of investment, could actually be quite a good player there. Um, and then, uh, yeah, I'd probably, I think I'd probably, if Doma wasn't available, I'd start Burn again, but I'd be inclined to make the sub earlier, and bring Southwith on earlier this week if it was Burn, but if it was Doma, then you'd sort of see how he was going, really.
Yeah. Do you strongly want to overrule that one, Cohen, or are you quite
Oh,
happy
I've
to
been out of it. It's
go with
fine.
the flow on that?
I,
Right.
my
Hooker,
main
who's
reason
fit?
behind my main reason behind the Doma shout at Lou said is if we are seeing a couple of Wales internationals not playing, I'm looking at the rest of the team and thinking, well, you can't rest many of the others. So if you were to rest some Wales internationals, I feel Doma would possibly be. I don't want to say one of the easier ones to rest because it sounds a bit disparaging, but just because of the options available.
See, we actually have people who could come in if he was rested. So we have the space in the squad. Yeah, that's fair.
Whereas when you go to Hooker immediately, it looks like a Wales international is going to play because Belcher's out, and I'm not sure on Daniel. So you'd expect Lloyd comes back in, who was continuously being referred to as, according to certain commentators and other people, was playing on the weekend as well. But
oh, really?
Yes. No comment on who and who had to correct them. But like you'd expect, I think, I'd expect Lloyd possibly could come back in and feature there. By the sounds of it, wasn't the most serious of injuries at the time, but he could have just been downplaying it. So I'd expect him.
He was on the pitch before the game on Saturday doing line out throwing drills with Bubba, and not. I wouldn't say he was fully there as a travelling reserve. He didn't do any of the sort of running that the travelling reserves do after, and he didn't do any of the tackle pad work that some of the guys do for the starters. But he was in full kit with bib on, going through line out drills as if there had been a hooker go down in warm up, it was him who was coming in. So I think, but I wonder if then they might try and protect him by. Well, I think actually I would make the opposite argument and go the positive way in that I think Hughes deserves a start after his performance last week, and Hughes, I think you can give Hughes 60 minutes there and see how well he goes, and then bring Lloyd on, and it's hope fingers crossed Hughes survives his hour, and that Lloyd then only has to do 20 minutes or so.
I thought you go the old die young thing of starting the player who's coming back from injury, and then which means then you give the big gut, you've got someone on the bench who, if needed, could play closer to 80 minutes.
Yeah, it depends how injured Lloyd is, I guess. This hip bang is an awkward one, isn't it? And if he's going to get like an injection or something, then how well that's going to work.
This was when I was talking to Rap, and I was saying I don't know who if Lloyd isn't fit, and depending on how serious Evan Daniels' issue is, I'm not entirely sure who we'd call up, or would we rely on someone like Kieran Azarati to cover Hooker? Or would we have to get Sloan in?
I think Gavin Parry from the Rags is somebody who was with the academy last year and who played for Scotland under 20s over the summer. I don't know exactly what he's doing aside from playing semi-professional rugby for the Rags at the moment, but having been part of the academy last year, I'd suggest he might be somebody who could be called upon if need to. He's a little bit. It's not. He's. I don't look at him and immediately think he is fit enough to play 80 minutes at professional rugby level, but he's a big old boy and he could do a job. So I wonder if he might go. Otherwise, yeah, we're sort of ringing up local Scottish clubs and asking if they've got anybody available.
Maybe ask for end of the pod, Craig Manson, if he fancies unretiring and going into the middle of the scrum. Tight head then. I think if we are resting internationals, maybe it's time to give Azarati a rest and we start Litterick. With Will Davis King on the bench. Yeah.
No, that's ticks all round.
I quite like the idea of Craig going in the scrum, although I think he would be hooking the opposite direction.
he would actively kick. He would actively kick the ball to Edinburgh. Yeah.
Be more squid.
Right, second. This is a difficult one. Now, this is the really difficult one now. Second row. Now, logic dictates we sign McNally to basically be that player who's there week in, week out, but he's also played a lot of minutes. I still don't know if Seb's back, and I'm not entirely sure why Thornton wasn't played, or if it was just because they wanted to have both him and Martin on the bench and hoping Donald could cover.
Going back to my Instagram snooping skills, the club put out a reel of training on Tuesday, and there is a line-out drill where it looks to me that Thornton is fit, is involved in it. Seb is there in kit in a bib, but is sort of standing where the 9 would be. So I don't know whether that means he's just watching that drill or whether he's not involved at all, but he can't be far off.
From a brief chat I had with him pre-Glasgow game, he looked. He said, I think he said that he was touch and go for this one. Maybe Ulster was the situation. So he's in the frame, both physically, as Dan's mentioned, and metaphorically. But I think it is. I'd be surprised if he's brought straight in. I'd suspect if he's involved at all, it would be bench with Thornton starting, which then I would suspect McNally's got to play, because I would have thought Teddy's the one who misses out because of Wales. But then again, is Teddy really in the Wales selection camp? That's probably one. I think we all agree he should be, but it's probably a debate whether or not he's one of the ones that has been singled out for being rested for that purpose.
Yeah, I look on that video is Teddy who's being thrown up in the line-out drill. And he's quite heavily involved in some of the attacking phase play that they've shown in it as well. My feeling is that Teddy will be involved, and there's no sign of McNally in any of the videos. So whether he's just being granted what you might call a Veterans Day off in the NFL, but I thought McNally looked like somebody who had slightly run out of fume a little bit towards the end. There was the side entry Moore penalty he gave away, which was
thick.
It just looked a bit tired to me. It just looked like somebody who was hooked in there and couldn't quite entangle himself and just got spun around by the Scarlets essentially. So I think it's Teddy, yes, and then question mark of Thornton or Donnell next to him.
Thornton. Should have asked in that snooping. Did you happen to say who were the props?
No, they all look the same.
In?
They all look the same from a distance.
All lithe, fit, young.
Yeah, that'll be it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we're thinking Thornton and Teddy as a sort of safe bet, and then.
Yeah, I'm
I'm going to bring up this point again, which is when your 6 is covering second row. The whole one of the big things with subs is you want them to have an impact, and you're not going to make an impact when you're moving from 6 into second row, because you're already fucking knackered from running around all day, and then you've suddenly now got to put extra effort into pushing. It's really hard.
I think that may well be the second row, but it doesn't fill me with massive confidence up against a big Edinburgh pack. It has to be said, but
up against a big Edinburgh pack with some very good line-out forwards.
Yeah, you're hoping for dry weather and that you can win a lot of good line-out ball and play off the top quite quickly there. I think with that second row player.
That's why I'd like to see Thornton just do what Thornton does, cue a line-out ball and.
Yeah, he's very good line-out forward
and get after the
very good at it.
Get after the other team's line-out as well, because I feel like we're sort of half threatening to steal some ball, but just go for it. It feels a bit like we're sort of start thinking about staying on our feet as well for the next phase. I just think if you've got quite athletic, tall blokes in your pack, then get up and cause them some real problems.
Yeah, there's a certain 6 down a couple of miles down the M4 to the east playing very well. They're doing exactly that, actually, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, yes, there is, yes. With lots of names.
Yes, maybe we discuss them a bit later on the pod. But moving on to our actual back row, as opposed to the ones more Gwent persuasion. Who are we going for? Because I think Al's been playing great today, but also I feel like there's only so many times you can carry him to brick walls for very little reward. You
I
know,
I
Dan Thomas again's
fancy
played a lot.
I fancy full change. Uh, Botham Young Mac is what I penciled in potentially for mine. Not a
I mean,
slight on
you're
any.
losing a lot of lineup there, mind.
You are.
When we talk about that and a lot of weight, but
Botham's good enough, I think, in the air to be a third choice behind Teddy and Thornton. But I just feel like the guys who started last week have gone through a lot of rugby, and like, it's not a slight on them at all. It's more of a pat on the back, if anything, to say hell of a shift across the first 4 rounds, lads. But we've got these guys ready. I think Mac needs to start potentially and put something on tape just to ensure his spot in the Wales squad. And he looks like somebody who is sort of like raging bull-esque coming off the bench, and I think he needs a good 60 minutes to expel some of that energy. And then I particularly like Young to come back in with that pace, with that regular breakdown threat. I think that'll be a real boost to our both sides of the ball, really, but particularly our attack. And then, if it's Donald rather than Botham, and they use Botham off the bench, I don't mind that. I'm not
yeah,
fussed either way.
that's it.
And again, with our back row options, I'm happy to be overruled on any of them because we've got so many good players now. They're all coming back fit. But that was the back row that I had penciled in on an all change balls to the wall basis.
I was just thinking of which players might necessarily have the most impact, and I do think Big Mac's having some decent impact off the bench, which is quite
Mm.
useful. And then I suppose if you've got both of them in your starting back row or on the bench, it doesn't, you don't really need to worry about having an out and out seven. I know both of them's not the same sort of seven as either Dan or Thomas, but he's a very, he's a very good international level seven. So I'm quite happy to go with that. I think we said last week that it was if we stuck to the same one this first Scarlets, it'd be an all change. Basically the three we didn't get go in the next week. Garwin, any thoughts on that one?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to agree with that. Although it does pay me to not select Allen. I said a couple of weeks ago that I think he's a fan favourite for the over 30s, and I count myself in that despite being a couple of years off it. But I think he's played very well so far at the start of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Halfbacks. Do we give Bevan another run out at 9? As I said, he's not really had that many minutes, or are we thinking
Send it. Mulder to beer.
We're just going pure. We're just going to go for pure jouet and hope for the best.
Or whatever the Afrikaans word for jouet is, anyway. There's no sign of De Beer in the training video for Tuesday.
I was worried about him going off. It didn't.
Yeah, and part of me thinks, they say you come off with a hamstring problem, but it's actually forced De Beer off, which makes me think it might actually not be attached to the bone or something like that. But because he's like so indestructible, he's just sort of wandered off with that. But like
he actually has no hamstring left anymore. It's literally just the bone. He's doing it out of sheer will and spite.
I think my gut feeling is that De Beer probably isn't. If he goes, it's got to be something serious to force him off. He doesn't just go off, so that he probably won't be involved this weekend. But I'd have backed Mulder and De Beer if he was fit.
I kind of want to just put Mulder in as well. Just say, do you know what? Right, what we're going to do is we're going to say no box kicks for 60 minutes. It doesn't matter who's on the bench, whether it's Davis or Bevan. Mulder, don't worry about kicking. Right, we've got plenty of other people who can kick. You just whip that ball out. Whip that ball out and do some sexy stuff.
I definitely have Mulder in the 23. I think, what's the point in signing these lads if you're not going to sort of rotate them a little bit and give guys a chance? But
so who would you rest out the other two then?
I think Davis for me. Davis has played the most minutes so far, and I'd probably start Bevan and Mulder off the bench. But
yeah, I was thinking of.
I think that's all right. And then it's almost certainly Sheedy at 10 then, really, unless he does go Ben, but I think that would be a surprise if he went, or Jennings, but I think he was surprised if he dropped one of them straight into 10.
I don't know. I'd love to see Ben 10.
Don't see it
It's
happen.
been a while since. No, I don't. I think it'll be Sheedy. Yeah. So that's our halfbacks. So centre combo. Jennings is fit now, so that's one thing to
Hmm.
say. And we were saying about resting Lilo. Would you rip up that centre combination entirely, or would you say keep Ben Thomas so that we've got continuity in that back line somewhere?
It depends if Ben is captured by the Team Wales rest in the PRA type stuff. Because I'm pretty sure he's played every minute of every game so far. So if he is being forcibly rested, then yeah, you can't pick him. If not, I think you still just keep picking him. To be honest,
I think even if Wales are trying to force him, say
yeah, I
you
mean,
can rest for
just
another
tell the
game.
ref your
It's fine.
name's Rory Jennings or something like that, and then he like runs on.
Oh, good old second team rules.
So I don't know. Without knowing exactly what the rules are, it's difficult to say. But I just feel like if he's fit and available, you just have to keep picking him. Really, he's playing so well and is so integral. And Jennings has been signed as a backup ultimately, and I don't think he's a rotation option. I think he is literally a backup for when Ben isn't available. And then 13, I think it is Grady this weekend. I,
Yeah, I think because I'm not entirely so sure who else you'd pick really. I mean, maybe you move Millard in, but
Yeah.
yeah,
As soon
that
as
would
and
be the
but
other
the
one.
thing is, I think he's doing so well on the wing, and actually our back three's probably not. I mean, I'm not sure what's happened with you and Stevens, or if he
Well,
was just being rested for a
he's
few
no, he's
games.
still fit. He was out there before the game. The only real backline play that they show in my Instagram snooping clip, it appears to me to be Stevens and Hamer Webb on the wing. Um,
And I think,
which and then Grady at 30, it looks to me to be a 13 in it. So it's it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Millard doesn't play this weekend because he was holding his knee quite substantially after the tackle on Plumtree, which was already held together by quite a lot of tape. But
and I said he didn't last that long to the second half
yeah, so
before Webb came on. So
I think that I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that it's Grady and then Stevens, Hamer, Webb win it as your sort of outside backs,
yeah.
which although much
Well, I said
changed
if we
and
don't know what's happened with Beetham, where Beetham is at the moment, I think that's still
yeah,
quite a while off, isn't it?
there's no mention of him week to week, which doesn't isn't very positive. But
Which
that
is
as
very gutting for
an
him.
outside back four is pretty exciting. To be fair, those four
Yeah,
together, like it's a bit of a risk where they
if we
haven't
can
played
get them
much.
ball.
Yeah, but that I mean that is into not maybe not like if you were picking our highest quality 23, you might have one or two others in there. But in terms of most exciting, you wouldn't go far wrong with those four as the option.
Yeah, and but the problem is we still haven't got a 12. Are we going to nail down Ben Thomas for now,
Yeah,
or
we're
do you think?
kidnapping him and taking him up. Fuck the
Yeah, screw
WRU.
it. Tell him he's Beetham. They'll definitely
Dan
give
with
you that, right?
NWA impression there.
Right. So starting lineup of Domachowski, Dav Hughes, Reece Littrick, Rory Thornton, Teddy Williams, James Botham, Thomas Young, Big Mac, and then in the backs we've got Bevan, Sheedy, Ewan Stevens, Ben Thomas, Mason Grady, Gabe Hamer Webb, and Cam Winnett. Pretty happy with that starting lineup.
Yeah, I mean, when it's the other one who may come under a WRU rest thing, I don't know. But
But I'm not too sure.
well, if
I
he doesn't
suppose
play, then who is? Yeah, I literally don't know who the other option is.
you're looking
Stevens?
at maybe asking.
Gabe has played there a little bit when he was down under, and then when he was at Southland in New Zealand, he wore 15 once or twice. But yeah, I wouldn't be massively
Did we,
convinced by
we
any of
signed
our other
someone else?
options.
I'm sure. Oh no, that was. I think Stevens has played 15.
Stevens has played
The
a
only other
bit.
thing I can think of is we're calling up one of the right. We're calling up like a Matty Young or
Yeah,
something.
Matty Young could step in. He'd been all right maybe, but that's a big old ask to suddenly go and make your debut away at Edinburgh.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's one of those ones where Gats is, Gats saying you've got to rest these players and saying
Yeah.
we actually
Mm.
can't.
All right, Gats,
Um,
get us Nagy. Send us Nagy because you've got the power to do
Father Walsh,
that. I've got to stick with my Swans
or
University
Ewan
boys.
Rosser, if we're going for other going elsewhere. On the bench, then it sort of starts picking itself basically because of injuries and potential rest. So I've got Evan Lloyd, Danny Southworth, Will Davis King as our replacement front row, and then I've got Seb penciled in, maybe Ben Donnell in the 19 jersey.
I think Donald.
Yeah, it depends. It sort of depends on Seb's fitness, but I'd be more if he's not 100%, I'd be more tempted to keep him back for next week and not
Yeah.
risk him this weekend.
And
Yeah.
again, but with Donald, it's they are the sort of players. I know we're saying we want to have good rotation and not knacking out players, but it is sort of the reason we sign players like him is basically to be there near enough all the time. So then number 20 jersey, I'm probably going. I mean, if we've got Donald in 19, I'm probably leaning towards Dan Thomas, or it's either gonna be Dan Thomas or Big Al.
I was
Number
thinking Big
20.
Al because if something happened to Young, then both of them could play at seven. Whereas if something happened to Big Mac, then you haven't got an
Both of them
obvious
could
like
play at 8,
big. Well,
and
yeah,
then but then we haven't got a
he
six.
can, but you
Yeah,
lose the big ball carrier. I think with
yeah.
if something happened to Big Mac, then so I'd be tempted to go Lawrence in 20.
Yeah, I agree.
I like that. And then we all want Mulder and for pure chaos.
Yeah, Mulder. I think Jennings probably makes his debut in the 22 jersey then.
Yeah,
And then 23. I mean, we come
I
on to
think
the
we were talking about maybe not having Matty Young in, but
yeah.
it might be. I
I was
suppose Miller.
thinking if Millard's fit, he probably wears 23 there.
Yeah,
But if he's not fit, and you're looking for a young lad to make his debut, maybe not Young, but maybe Bowen, second hat trick last week.
yeah, and again, covers wing fullback.
Yeah,
I mean, you probably want to stick him on the wing for a debut at senior,
yeah, I think
but
you
it's
use him
looking
off
quite
the
good for the
wing, and
Rags.
you know because Jennings can do 10 and 12, and then if something happened to 15, you could probably nudge Ben Thomas back there or something if in
Yeah,
an
if you
emergency.
really,
So
really had to, I'd rather not, but you
yeah, and
could put him
then
there. Or I said, I'm sure Ewan Stevens actually has played a lot of 15. I'm sure when we signed him, he was a sort of wing come fullback.
he's
Because
definitely never played fullback for Newcastle, but he
maybe
might have a younger level.
we had no. Yeah, I'm sticking Tom Bowen in, and just because
Yes.
we might as well be vaguely excited with some of these selections.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's our team. Dan will post it out uh, at some point after the pod being released. So look for if you are please I might put a message on the post say please listen to the pod before asking why so and so isn't playing.
I think two things I would ask. People listen to the pod, and also if you're going to say, "Oh, you can't pick X player," you have to pick somebody else because we can't just turn up with 22 players. All right? You
Yeah,
have to provide an alternative. That's the
yeah,
new rules. Otherwise, I'm starting blocking people. Like that's the next level.
absolutely. And as we've mentioned, Tom Bowen getting another hat trick. Shall we pick up after the defeat and talk a little bit about the Rags' resounding win? I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, probably not as resounding as
Sounding, yeah, it's a bit strong.
as it should have been.
Let me have some hyperbole.
It was it was it was a good win, but over winless Swansea, I feel like they might have had half an eye on the sort of the double bonus point and sweeping them aside a bit quicker. They started slow, went 10-0 down, um, then recovered early second half have obviously blown them away. And it was 38-21 going into the last few minutes, but then Swansea have scored in the last minute to make it 38-29 altogether. Still a good win. Lots to like. I mean, obviously we've only seen the highlights because it clashed with the first team game on Saturday, but some of the tries are really nice tries. I mean, there's one in the first half where Harry Wild puts a perfect kick pass in for Elijah Evans, and then Tom Bowen's on his shoulder. There's a really nice miss pass from Wild then for Bowen's second. Bowen creates Benji Williams' try with a really nice inside line popping up in midfield. So yeah, really good rugby from the Rags. That young back line is clicking. Steph Emmanuel with another interception try, which has been like as good as he's been with the ball. It's becoming a real like thing of his. And if you watch, I'd urge you to watch the replay on or the highlights on Twitter. Find it out on the Super Rugby Cymru one. He comes from absolutely nowhere. It's really quite comical, actually, how he just there's a pod of Swansea forwards, and he spots it from miles away. If he misses it, there's a massive hole in the Cardiff defence. But he pops up as if the pass was meant for him, and he's straight under the post. So that's having done the same to Ebu Vale a couple of weeks ago. That's becoming a little trick of his. But yeah, Rags are getting a few lads back from injury where they were struggling a little bit when going away to Carmarthen. But are looking in a really good spot. 2 home games over the next 2 weeks now, Aberavon and Bridgend. Aberavon struggling a bit, and Bridgend, who are doing much better this season, to be fair. But
Probably full of
have
ex-Cardiff
well,
and
yes, it
Ponty
is a
players.
bit Cardiff Ponty old boys, but they have a bit of a hoodoo thing about coming to the Arms Park. I don't think they've won their capital for a little while. So, yeah, if they can keep this run up and knit another 2 wins together on these 2 games before their own break across November, then they're looking in a seriously good spot, the Rags. And it won't be long before I know we've mentioned Bowen on the bench this week, but it's not going to be long before we're seriously talking about some of these lads coming into first team reckoning, like
So Steph
Bowen,
Emmanuel's looking
Emmanuel,
very good at 10
Elijah
as well.
Evans. Yeah, Elijah Evans is looking really good when he's fit at 30. Matty Young, Cody Stone's back fit, who's probably a year away slightly, play for the 20s again this year. But particularly in that back line, there is some serious talent there, and it's going to make some interesting contract renewals and some interesting squad planning debates over the next few years. But all good ones, no scrabbling around for players. Certainly.
But
Yeah.
whilst we're talking about players stepping up, one player who's sort of been sat around the Rags for a while, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, Dan, but if we are short in the back three, there we cross. Like you could do worse than an out and out finishing wing, could you? Or do you think he's probably not quite got enough to step up?
Oh no, I think he's there. I'm perplexed that none of the Welsh sides have even like chucked him a phone call or anything. I don't, as ever when discussing the semi-pro guys, it is difficult because you don't know exactly what I know what some guys do, but I don't know what Derry does aside from being a semi-professional rugby player. I don't know what his other career is. It might be the case that he can't just give it up for a 3-month short-term deal, or it's not in his best interest to do that if that's what he's being offered. And I can't imagine anyone's offering lads stepping up from the SLC more than sort of a 1-year deal at this point. They're going to have to prove themselves. But yeah, I am surprised, and I just think as well from a Cardiff point of view, because obviously we signed like Stevens this summer and gave him a web over the last 18 months, and not to take away from them at all, but I would like to see us dip in and sign a semi-pro player from the Rags just to validate the fact that it is a legitimate pathway, and like signing for the Rags. We had the whole Ratty thing, and we've run with that for a while. That coming in and spending the summer with the Rags and then stepping up and training with the first team can lead to a pro contract. But that was, 6 years ago now, I think it was, that he stepped up. And so I would just like to see us do it again. And it makes it easier, I think, for the Rags to recruit good level semi-professional players who've just come out of the professional game, and we can have a look at them. And ultimately, the Ratty experiment worked really well. He went on to become an international player and was a massive benefit for the first team. So if that's the case, I don't see why we wouldn't do that again. But yeah, on Cross in particular, he's clearly too good for the Super Rugby Cymru. So I am surprised that he hasn't taken there isn't been a contract from one of the Welsh sides or from like an English Championship side or something like that.
It is especially surprising this season when you see Dragons starting the season with a couple of back three injuries. Hewitt's out long term. Ross is now out for a bit. I know Scarlets have got seemingly a policy of they pick a guy at fullback and then shift him over one, and then the next guy gets injured and then they shift the next guy over. But it does seem to be that they're short. They're missing Steph and Tommy Lewis long term. So yeah, 100%. You look at they probably want to. Well, their situation is slightly different because they do have this ability, as I mentioned. You can move Tom Rogers over, you can move Johan Nicholas over. Push comes to shove, I suppose they can move Johan Lloyd over, but I don't know who'll be moving him. But they've got guys who can slot into that winger position. It could just be a situation of teams don't have the budget really to employ a fifth winger at the moment. But I completely agree with what Dan says. He looks spot on, available to make the step up, and on Elijah Evans, Steph Emmanuel, they look a class above him at the moment. There's Cardiff at top of the table for a reason, surprisingly. I think start of the season, I don't think many of us would have picked them to be top of the table. I think the big game at the moment, the big game this week will be how Bridgend go against Ebervale. because Bridgend host Ever Vale. The way Bridgend have been going, they've been firing the last couple of weeks. Helps when you talk about players being in a class above the league. Well, Ed Howley's one of those. And so I think that'll be an interesting battle in the Super Rugby Cymru. And then, Bridgend coming to Cardiff Farms Park. Yeah, they don't tend to do well there, but this is a new and improved Bridgend side, so it could be a big test for Cardiff.
Yeah,
should beat Aberavon, though. Should beat Aberavon, I would say.
Anyway, I just realised with all the Edinburgh talk, we didn't do any predictions. Do you guys want to do just quickly do your predictions, or just say no? We're not predicting this.
Yeah, no.
It hurts.
Unless we have a team, and then it'll be a gun.
Yeah, it is definitely. It could be. I think I had because I had to nail my colours to maths. I think I picked Edinburgh by 6, and I trusted us to just about stay within 7 again. But it does depend.
We said this season would be different.
I've yet to see any evidence. I'm hoping for the reverse psychology because I picked Scarlets by 8 and then we lost. So if I pick Edinburgh to win, maybe we win. I don't know. Maybe my predictions have gone completely to pot now. Should we move on to sort of the international game? And I think some very important things that need to be talked about with Team Wales. So let's talk about that win against Japan. I'm yet to remain convinced. I don't know about you two gents. For obviously, people aren't where we're talking about Wales' 19-10 win over Japan in WXV2. I'll be honest, it was a proper shonky performance. It reminded me very much of the Italy game where they were able to just about get the job done over a side they maybe should have done a lot better against.
Yeah. As in, I don't think there's many maybes about it. Played well in parts. I will give them that, especially sort of, I think it was about 10 to 30 minutes. They played quite well, Wales. Scored 2 tries, had another chalked off, rightly so, by the way. And then second half, I don't know if anyone's been watching the Craig Bellamy sides, but it was a bit like the football side where they play for 40 minutes and then just shut up shop and bar a Jazz Joyce interception. It was a little bit Japan heavy for a second half, in my opinion. Japan showed some nice touches. I really like their fly half, whose name, I've got to be honest, escapes me at the moment, but really like the way they were trying to play and the way they were trying to attack. But Wales, I did see some positives. I really liked the interplay between the back row, and I know that's what you'd expect of a world-class back row, but there was interplay between them. There was attempt to pop the ball inside and outside. I think it was the Kira Bevan try. All 3 back rowers involved in setting up that try. I think it was an inside ball from Callender to Butchers to Lewis, who then feeds Kira Bevan. That's really nice. I thought the interplay in the front row looked good as well. Cecilia to Karis pop passes, things like that. That looked like development compared to where we were 12 months ago. I'm not quite convinced that the power game that was there 12 months ago has increased. If anything, I get the impression whether or not we've actually taken a step backwards, or it's just simply that everyone else has improved exponentially. Perhaps a bit of a mix of both. That seems to be lacking. Jazz at times does resemble a one-player team in the backs. We talk about running sideways. Does tend to do that a little bit. Looks like she could do with someone coming on an angle. Have been impressed with Hannah Bluck. I will say that. I think for someone who's been, having to drop out of the 23 and then drop in last minute, I think she's been very impressive in that 12 jersey. I also didn't hate Kaylee Powell at 10. I know it's not ideal because she's perhaps doesn't have the kicking game that Shaky has, and it's a completely different skill set. It's just a completely different skill set, but she does have capability and is a quality player. And I do think Nell Metcalf played particularly well along with Natalia John in the game.
I think she's been quietly good all tournament. Actually, I think she's been one of the quite positives when she has had to do anything.
she looks like she's bulked out a bit as well, and looks like she's a physical presence in attack. And to be fair, does make some good tackles in defence. So I think Nell has been a real positive for someone who's still. I think she's still shy of 20, isn't she? I think she was 18 last year. So
she's playing for Gwalia this season. Like, so
yeah,
so it's her breaking through.
Yeah,
and I think she's signed a Gloucester contract off the back of it as well. And so Dan, what were your thoughts on Cymru women?
19, she's 20 in December now, Metcalf. I have no further comments to add. I thought you yourselves have summed it up very nicely. I would just like to refer back to my comments from last week that I think it's time for a new attack coach. That's.
Can I just say also, I think John Cunningham will be very happy with as he was called on the commentary of Dirks. He called him John.
Oh, that's what we just avoid saying Johan in like a strong South African accent.
Can we? if we're going down this,
Johan, like their head coach, the director of
true. Yeah, that's true.
When Lee
it's the same pronunciation.
We've got Piers in the front row. Piers Morgan is making an appearance in the Wales team. Like that was killing me. Like I know I had a rant about Dowie Lake, but Piers was different level. And then there was a mention of 14 men at one point, but
I can get that. That's just
it's like shouting man on.
It has been poor. Sorry, the coverage.
I don't think there's a man who plays Wales.
But jeez, it was poor.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah, I'll be honest. It is something they need to work on. The thing like at the BBC. I know, Sean, on the podcast, we have discussed about it about BBC have cut a lot of money and stuff, but they could have done a little bit more with this. I think.
I don't think it's them, is it? They're just using
it's not them.
Yeah,
sorry,
they've bought the rights for a feed, but I feel like they could have.
They could have put their own commentary guys on it potentially from BBC Wales if they'd wanted to.
But I appreciate they are on the beer ass for money.
I think
Carwyn knows quite.
Yeah, I feel like
Carwyn knows and is trying to keep tight-lipped.
To save Carwyn from incriminating himself, the emphasis has to be on World Rugby to grow. Still at this point, it's their competition. It's them who've bollocksed it up by putting it in places where nobody's turning up for it, and it's them who have skimped on the media coverage of it a bit as well. There has to be because I don't think WRU have covered themselves in glory with their coverage of the women's team over the last few weeks either. But exactly, so I think the World Rugby have to be setting minimum standards for the unions involved for their coverage, and they have to be. And there's not going to be a WXV next year because the World Cup isn't it, and I think they're reviewing what they're doing
to do something
afterwards.
Similar for 26.
Yeah, but they need to figure out a way that it will actually be successful because at the moment it's the basic idea is right and it's good, but the execution of it is not quite there, and they need to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to get crowds in and how to get eyes on it outside of the stadiums as well.
I get the impression almost that they got carried away with how it went when they joined TikTok, and it was TikTok Six Nations and all this was rosy, and they thought, oh, we can do no wrong, and then just became complacent and thought, oh, we can just shove it on anything and it'll work. And that's not the case. I think they've almost thought, what's the saying, Moses to the mountain or something like that. Give them, put it there and they will come. But I don't think that's the case. I think they've got to improve the quality of it because, there's a number of things about that. Putting it in
a country where half of the players would be put in prison for who they love is a fucking bad idea. For a start, there's only in a country that not is on a poor that not is the time zone's wrong, but deciding 3 o'clock on a Friday, that's when people are going to go watch rugby. Brainless, completely brainless.
It's not been smart. What has come out of it is, I suppose, some very good role models in World Rugby have backed it and come out quite strongly on it. Sia Khaleesi being probably front and centre of that in recent times, and that's been a positive, but there are very few others, aside from performances on the pitch, a la Ireland, Canada, who had a very good tournament overall. And then you'd probably include Japan to some extent in that as well, despite being relegated, were impressive at points. So
South Africa as well, I thought the Bok women were fantastic. Spain just made it look like WX3 was a walk in the park for them. They conceded
should be.
one try the whole tournament, which
It
is
should be.
much better than England managed, actually.
They're in that nasty in between zone at the moment, I think. Perhaps really it'd be interesting to see a game between them and Japan and them in the box, actually, I think.
Yeah, well, I said I think. Oh no, so it's Japan and Fiji who play each other all the time. Samoa as well. The Samoa women quite impressive as well. Their 10 was the top point scorer. I've forgotten the name, but please tune it. We're going to record the women's pod tomorrow night, so please into that. But there'll be far much more love for all the WXV there as well. Any final points on Wales women, and we'll go into Wales squad. Yeah, and I mean the one thing I do want to end on that is when the most positive person around Wales women in Philippa Tuttiett is saying something needs to change, and I think she tried it as very diplomatically as she possibly could to say all the possible things, but kept coming to the same point. Maybe it's time to you listen and actually start putting some effort back into women's team more than just throwing some money at it. And that's where I'm going to leave that. Now, I just want to go on to Wales squad. So I think we'll just focus on the Cardiff players we think are probably going to get. So we'll go nailed on. So we took players who we think are nailed on, likely, and then some exciting potentials.
Mm-hmm.
After that, so who do you guys think is a nailed on to be in that squad?
Nailed on. Doma, I think, is almost particularly on the continued non-selection of Nikki Smith. I think Doma's definitely in. And
Please don't start, Dan. I can't anymore.
And then I think Azarati's almost certainly in there. So tight head's a bit of a weird one because I don't think anybody really knows what's happening with Thomas Francis. And Dylan Lewis isn't really playing for Harlequins, and obviously wasn't fancied at times last season. Griffin, I'm not sure what's happened with Griffin at Bath. He's only come off the bench round one, and then he's just disappeared. So is he injured or just not being picked?
I think the problem is you've got two international class tight heads ahead. So I think that's. He's saying actually no, because Thomas Dutoit would have only just come back.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been there, would he? I don't think.
Yeah.
If fit, Griffin's got to be a selection based purely on his quality.
Yeah,
number, hasn't he?
He desperately needs to find somewhere else. I mean, I'm not even necessarily saying Wales. Tight was I think Henry. I know we were saying we're going to focus mainly on Cardiff, but yeah, I'm actually to be fair, Henry Thomas is scrummaging incredibly well, and if you're thinking we just need someone to scrummage first.
Yeah, tight is interesting. You got. I've written down. What have I got? 7 names for tight head, and I'm not really convinced by any of them, I have to say. But you've got Francis, Lewis, Griffin, Azarati, Leon Brown. I think has to come back into the conversation now. He seems to be relatively fit again, and Gatland will pick him at whatever cost. I thought he looked quite good against the Ospreys in round 1. I haven't seen their game against the Lions on the weekend, so I can't comment on that.
I thought he looked good then as well, and I believe I'm pretty sure he was playing in the Sharks game as well.
No, he dropped out last minute. Dropped out the
last
Sharks
minute,
because he was ill. Yeah, and then you got Henry Thomas and Harry O'Connor at Scarlets. I think O'Connor's probably slightly down the list, but
I think he's injured as well because I think
is it the other?
Been Thomas and Wainwright.
What's the other O'Connor then? Sam. It's him.
Sam's a Lucid.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
Bollocks now. There's no O'Connors left. They've all gone.
There's an Irish immigrant.
But there's six guys there, and I think Azarati is probably the only one who is fit and playing regularly out of all of them.
I'd say Henry Thomas is as well, to be fair.
I don't know if he's fit. I don't look at Henry Thomas and think he's fit. I
mean, he is physically lasting significant chance of the game.
Is he getting around
going scrum to scrum?
Is he? Yeah, that's what I think he's doing. He's lolloping. That's why I would describe Henry Thomas as he covers the pitch. But yeah, I think Thomas, maybe Thomas Azarati and Brown as your 3 tight heads, and then if Griffin's fit, you'll probably pick 4 tight heads because Gatland loves a tight head, doesn't he? But
and remember, I had this argument with this discussion with James because he was sort of picking a squad based on a similar size to thing. But when we're based at home, we do tend to go slightly larger, even if it is only 3 games.
Yeah,
so I could see a 4th option in some of these.
Yeah, I think especially because Griffin, if available and fit, but even if he is selected, won't be available for that first week of camp because it'll just be the Welsh-based players. They won't be released until the second week that they join camp. Um, so you won't miss any games, but that first week of training, I think they'll want to have probably 3 full front rows there for scrummage training purposes. But yeah, so I got Dominic Azar and a definite. I've got Ben Thomas,
Evan Lloyd, I
Grady,
think,
and
probably.
so my Evan Lloyd question was Lake's obviously there, hooker. Like that's a no question, no brainer. And then I think
He's not fit.
it's two for me from Elias, still there or thereabouts. Evan Lloyd. I've really liked Brody Coughlin at the Dragons.
This is another I
Yeah,
was going to say.
him as well.
On a similar logic, I figured maybe he goes 4 in some of these positions.
Potentially, maybe he could not pick Elias. It's not beyond the realms of possibility that he drops Elias altogether.
I personally, I think Evans ahead of Elias at the moment.
Yeah, and like Coughlin, same as Lloyd when he was selected. They are, I mean, they are obviously Gatland-esque hookers. Like Coughlin was 6'1" and 120 kg or whatever, like big old
he
boy.
gets around as well.
Yeah, he does
He
100%.
gets around,
Yeah.
and his arrows have been pretty good as well.
Yeah.
Like his line outwork is
So, I mean,
is top.
yeah.
I'd say he's
Gotta give him
probably
credit.
and I
Lake
agree with
Coughlin and
Jamie
Lloyd
down
is
on
a
Dragons
nice
Nose.
hook.
He probably should have got the call up.
It's quite nice as well because he's really forced his way in there. Like he was what, fourth, maybe even fifth choice start of last season behind. Look at Bradley, D. Benjamin. I want to say there's someone else there as well. I can't think off the top of my head, but he's really forced his way into there to get in that question. And yeah.
I think I've just for Lloyd there. I think I don't think you can like permanent marker him definitely in there. I think he's probably
So we're going in so we move him down to a probable.
I think he's a high probable, but if he did miss out, like say he wasn't fit this weekend and then he missed out, I'd maybe get it if he went Lake Elias and Coughlin just for 2 experienced and then 1 inexperienced guy rather than Lake and then 2 inexperienced guys. But like if it was me, with obviously I'm picking the team with absolutely no pressure or responsibility, I'd go Lake, Coughlin, and Lloyd. I think at this point. So.
And then other, I think your other definites were Thomas and Grady.
Thomas, Grady, and Winnett are my 3 backs.
I think there's no real argument there.
I'd put Bevan in there as well.
I mean, in fairness, Bevan was very good in Australia.
Because Thomas's first choice, okay, fine. And then I think there's a guy playing reasonably well most of the time at Ospreys who's probably not going to get a look in.
Yeah.
Whether Hardy gets a look in after coming off the bench. He's only played a bit off the bench and he didn't click immediately, let's put it that way, against Bulls. So Gareth is the big question. It's I think that's the only Gareth is the big question, whether he goes with Gareth again, but I don't think it's going to be Blacker. So I do think Bevan's ahead of Hardy and Ruben Morgan Williams at the moment. It's just I don't see there being 2 other scrum halves ahead of him, to be honest. That's probably what I mean.
It was Ruben Morgan Williams who it's prevented me from putting Bevan as definite. I think for me he's in the same as Evan Lloyd, where he's like highly probable. But I think you're right in that Gatland doesn't seem necessarily inclined to pick Ruben Morgan Williams. So yeah, if you're debating it on who actually should be in there, then it is a debate. If you're debating it on who Gatland's likely to pick, then yeah, Bevan probably is a definite then, because he did play well over the summer. I thought he was pretty good again on the weekend for us, but I don't think he's still like properly fully match sharp there.
No,
and
he's not.
What I would like, I think he does need to improve, and being in an international camp will help that, is he really needs to improve his sort of organisation of the breakdown when he's kicking the ball away. When Davis is going to kick the ball away, it's very clear, we're taking a phase, you 3 stand by there, I'm throwing the ball to you, set it up and I'll kick it away.
And and it's like it's those who all right, you 2 are going, you 2 are going to make the caterpillar. So
Bevan,
who's involved.
I'd just like to see him be a bit more authoritative, really. Like I think he is a good talker, and I think he knows what he wants to do. I think he just needs to be very clear in what he wants from his forwards to protect the ball at the breakdown, to protect him when box kicking it, and to organise themselves to set up that clearance. But yeah, like I thought his tempo and his pass was pretty good from the base, and he tried to mix things up a little bit as well.
I mean, for me, the one thing which moves Bevan slightly higher, I think he is probably in the probables more than a definite, but is it, you know, and it's a thing Gatlin makes a big thing of, is a left-footed kicking option.
Yeah.
He loves his left, he loves to, or at least he loves to use that as an excuse, left-footed kicking option.
Just to go on about it, certainly.
You know, like if we're going with Gatlin, like, you know, that is something. Any other definites you want to chuck in, Colin? I think that's probably about right.
Yeah, I was going to say, I wonder what Gatlin would have done with the whole England around football team around 2006, where they couldn't get anyone with the left foot on the right wing, on the left wing. There's no one else. I'd really love to be sat here saying Teddy Williams is a definite. I think he's close. I think he's a probable, especially with Dav Jenks and Fender injured. I think he's a highly probable, but there's somehow we seem to have a lot of strong candidates in the second row all of a sudden, all of a similar sort of level. I do think Ben Carter's playing very well as well at Dragons, and I think he's reveling in the captaincy role. But so that'll be a huge feather in his cap for Gatland, I think. But I think he's highly probable. I struggle to think of 5 second rows ahead of him, so I think Teddy Williams is probably the other one I'd put in that bracket.
I think for second rows, I think Beard, Shunza, and Will Rowlands are definites. And then I think you've probably got 2 from 3, which is Carter, Teddy, and then somebody who I think will get in purely to capture him is, I think Gatland will call Freddie Thomas up just from Gloucester. And I wonder if that might actually mean that Teddy doesn't quite make it, not on any sort of playing form thing, but he's going to get Thomas in there to get him involved, I think. And just because he's based in England and he's English qualified as well. And so then it becomes basically a shootout between Teddy and Carter. And maybe I think, you know, with our Cardiff base, like tinted glasses on, you know, Teddy's been really good. But I think from a neutral, if you try and look at it from a neutral point of view, I don't think there's anything in it between the two of them necessarily. I think what maybe tips it towards Carter and Gatland's mind is that Carter's is more ready to be that tight head lock at the moment, whereas Teddy's more of your loose head lock and a bit more mobile, and that we're always looking for more tight head locks. So yeah. Playing wise, I absolutely agree. There's not 5 better locks than him at the moment, but I think he might unfortunately end up unlucky on the basis that Gatland needs to get Freddie Thomas in there to cap him.
I'm gonna say something now that's gonna throw a massive target on my back, right? I'm aware of this, and actually I don't think it's gonna happen. But
you think Beard's shit?
No, I'm not. I don't think Beard's been playing that well. He's looking, you know, a bit like when Pivac dropped him, and he was just sort of ambling around, and it took him being dropped, and he got this rocket up his arse, and he started doing what he does best again.
I don't think he's been terrible. I don't agree with the initial statement that he's a definite. I don't think Will Rowlands is also a definite. That's slightly more controversial, but I don't think either of them are guaranteed to appear in a Wales autumn squad. I think there could be a couple of high-profile casualties this autumn, and I think one of those could be it.
I'm wondering with Rowlands.
That's based on zero knowledge.
I do wonder with Rowlands if it's a case of Gatland's just thinking, I know I can call on him ready for the Six Nations, and Gatland's has never given a shit about results in the autumn. Like, never really. Like, you know, for him, it's always been Six Nations, or you could argue he didn't give a shit about the last Six Nations. And I do wonder if he's thinking, do I want Rowlands to have to keep travelling back and forth to France? Or do I say...
He shouldn't have to travel back and forth though once he's in the squad, this time round. Because if he's in the squad, he'll be in the 23.
I do wonder if it's one of those things that, bit like what they said with sort of Thomas Francis, where they basically said, "Just we know you're there. We'll you know, like I still fully intend. I still think like Thomas Francis' contract ends 2026, so I think that World Cup season, I can see him getting a quick deal at like one of the Welsh sides." on the proviso that he's basically just playing for Team Wales and he's there ready to go if needed. I do, yeah. I'd like to see. I think, but I agree. Teddy's definitely more possible than definite. But yeah, I do agree. I think there's just something nagging me about. I just don't think, and also it would just add more fuel to the Ospreys fans' fire that Gatlin hates the Ospreys now. If they don't select Dan Beard, who's probably one of Gatlin's pet projects, really. All right. So I think we've definitely done our definites. So we've mentioned a lot of the probables in this with Bevan and Teddy and a few others. Any other people who we think probably could make the squad?
I think you
Are we
have to
saying
go.
that basically if for Cardiff players they're definitely in or they're definitely out for a lot of them?
I think you have to go into the back row as the only other Cardiff players. I think well, we'll talk about 10 maybe a bit, but back row is brutally competitive.
Possible heavy.
It's I think I mentioned Dan Thomas in there just because he started the season well. I don't think he's actually an international reckoning yet, but I think it's just put his name in there for as somebody to acknowledge he started the season quite well. But there are a number of better sevens than him. I think Martin obviously hasn't played much for us, but
Gatlin does like him.
Gatland will pick him. like Gatland will pick somebody who's 6'5" and that big and is sort of playing enough to just about justify it. Do I think, if I'm looking at the number 8 options at the moment, Aaron Wainwright, we don't know a huge amount about
I
his
think
fitness.
I think they've basically said he's not going to be fit for the autumn.
So
no, other way around. Sorry.
So he is fit.
Wainwright could make his return against Connacht, which is the weekend before.
Right. So Wainwright's there, but other, out and out 8 Scarlets have been playing Plumtree at 8. I don't think he's an international
Plumtree's
8.
I think he's probably close. I think
he's the closest.
He's the closest, and then after that, I'd say maybe Basham is in terms of an athletic mobile 8.
Yeah, I don't
see him getting in that back row as a 7.
You won't get in as a 7, but I think he'll go as a secondary 8. That's where I think Basham will go.
I could see Basham being the 20 jersey and it just be where
I think
to slot him.
So Basham comes into my Botham then question mark. So I think if you look at the back row, I think Morgan and Reffell are your 2 open side options almost certainly. I don't see anyone else bumping them at this point. And then I think Wainwright's obviously in if he's fit, because even if he hasn't played, he's just
because it's Wainwright. Yeah, I think
Big
Mac's probably there
so
or
then,
thereabouts.
Yeah, so then you've got quite a lot of players then who have played quite well. Shane Lewis-Hughes is.
I think for me, Shane Lewis-Hughes would be my go-to 6 because he's exactly what Gatlin's been trying to pick at 6. He wants a big horrible bastard to line out forward.
I think Plumtree's definitely in. So you got Plumtree, Wainwright, Morgan, Reffell, and then you've got probably Martin as your backup 8, and then I think you maybe have one of Shane Lewis-Hughes, Botham, and Basham. Unless you,
for me, you're very light at 6. I know Chunza can cover there, although I think he's played his best rugby for Wales.
Wainwright, you could have Wainwright 6, Martin 8.
Yeah.
You could have dual open side of Morgan 6 and Reffell 7 as well. So
I don't think that's off the cards. I think it should be, but I don't think it's off the cards because of the quality of those 2 players.
Yeah,
I think almost left in a situation where Wales is best. Going into the autumn with Faletau injured probably, and Wainwright mostly not match fit. Your best 2 back rowers are Jack Morgan and Tommy Reffell by a bit of a stretch. And then you're looking at who's your 6. I of the options available at the moment, I think Plumtree's probably the favourite to play there, but I'd probably go Chunza because I think, as I've mentioned, I think there's more strength and depth in the second row. I agree with you, Harley, though. I do think he's done his best work in the second row so far for Wales. But I struggle to see a 6. I do agree Shane Lewis has been playing well. I don't know about him making that step up again to that extent. He probably could do it. I think I struggle to think of another name that jumps out, though. I agree with what Dan said about both them versus Basham is quite an obvious. Like, in the way that they don't play in a similar way, they're very similar players in that sense that they can play 6, 7, and 8, just in very different ways. I just think Basham has the edge at the moment because both of them's not played much, and to be fair, Basham did play well for the majority.
But I think you've got to look at why Basham's been allowed to play well, and it does come down to Kelly and Shane Lewis-Hughes playing really well.
Yeah, Kelly was superb on the weekend as well.
And I said that's why I think Shane. There's just something about Shane Lewis-Hughes, the way, particularly the sort of like the extra venom he seems to have in everything, whether it's carrying his his breakdown threat. In fact, he's just quite happily squaring off the South Africans and laughing at them when they try to start. There's just something very Gatland about it. It's just, this is the player I think, I can see this is what I think Gatland wants in his 6. Like, to me, Shane Lewis-Hughes is becoming the player he wanted Seb to be.
It's a bit surprising to me because I thought Woodman would be the guy. I thought this was the season Woodman would kick on and be that man, but maybe it's a little bit early for him and in that taking that mantle up as yet.
The other option, who we didn't name, who I think has been playing very well, although admittedly he's only really been playing second row due to injuries, is Ratty, who again I think is there. But I do think, like, last season it was quite easy to pick on Gatland for not picking Ospreys players, whereas I feel like this season so far maybe he's got a bit more of a valid point.
I think Ratty misses out. Nothing again. I agree with you. Has been playing well. I did think of him a minute ago, but he's not going to play 8. He's probably not going to play 6, and he's not going to play second row. So that's kind of where I see it, is that he's almost a victim of being quite versatile and slotting in at the Ospreys in a second row and fitting in that row jersey. But as we mentioned earlier, the options at second row are so high, and then he's not played enough 6 to slot in at 6. So that's kind of how I see it.
Any final thoughts there?
No, I agree with that. I think just ultimately Martin is probably in there, whether whether his form and playing time deserves it or not. I think Gatland probably does, and I agree with what Karen says on a both and v Basham head to head at the moment. I really like both of them, so it pains me to say it, but I think if I'm being objective, I think Basham just nudges ahead of him at the moment, but. That could, I mean, what I would say is, as we've picked both of them in our starting lineup, if he goes in as a Stormer this weekend, that could tilt back the other way as well. That's not a definite one, both of them's
get a red card this weekend.
Yes, he could do that. But he's a player who has obviously got great quality and is, I don't know if I'd quite test match animal him yet, but he rises to the occasion of a test match whenever he plays for Wales. I think he just needs he just needs to stay fit for more than about 5 games in a row, essentially. Like he's been desperately unlucky with his injuries and his fitness. So if he can, maybe it wouldn't be a bad thing for him to not, if Basham were ahead of him and he was to play for us this weekend against Ulster, have a few weeks off and then have a really good festive period, be there or thereabouts for the Six Nations squad then. But the only thing I would definitely say on the back row is that if Faletau gets picked by Gatland, having not played for Cardiff, I'll go and slash all his tyres so he can't drive to the Vale.
No, what you need to do is you need to slash all but one of them, and then it won't come under insurance for militia. Just like a police friend of mine.
That sounds like somebody who's got experience.
What are you trying to say?
Interesting knowledge behind.
I just know some very random things around insurance, okay?
Some mean people be going around the magic roundabout again, is it?
Bloody stiff, mate.
My last Wales, just veer away from the magic roundabout. My last Cardiff/Wales point is 10, and does Sheedy make it or not?
I don't think so. I know he's been playing well in patches, but there's one thing Gatland was trying to say, which is what he wanted: a big physical 10 who's going to stand up in defence. And Sheedy's shown that isn't him. And I think as well, goal kicking's a big issue. And Gatland, and I don't, with the way Gatland's setting up his team, I don't see another goal kicker being necessarily. I don't see it personally. I think Ben Thomas potentially Sherrer's your second choice 10 with Anscombe starting.
I
don't
don't
even know
just.
his second choice.
My question is who, because I've got the list of potential tens. I've got Sheedy, Anscombe, Costello, Lloyd, Dan Edwards, and then I've chucked Lloyd Evans in there as well, just at the end. But like,
I think
I,
he's definitely over it, but yeah.
I think
He's been playing well, to be fair. Give it to
yeah,
him.
he's gone all right, and he is a Welsh 10 essentially. It's not a list of like possibles; it's just a list of Welsh 10s, really.
Yeah.
But I think we'd all agree Anscombe's like a definite, like
I think he is now, yeah.
yeah, and then sort of, I look at the others and you can't really make I don't think you can make a strong case for any of the others to be like full on definites. Costello has not been that impressive at the Scarlets this season. Lloyd was good on the weekend, but is he a player that translates to the Test arena in this Wales team in particular? I think Dan Edwards has been pretty good for the Ospreys, but is still very young. And do you want to expose him to that at this point? Sheedy, I think Ali made some good points around his defence and his physicality, his goal kicking, has shown nice touches in attack, but I don't think you can go all out and say he definitely deserves to be in there. So it isn't like the best. It wouldn't necessarily surprise me if Sheedy slipped in, particularly as a bit of experience there and decent kicking out of hand. Anscombe, Sheedy, Thomas as your tens.
Yeah, it's almost a 4-into-1 where you go the ones in form, which are probably um, Dan and Lloyd to some extent,
Yeah,
although it's been inconsistent form, are probably the ones you think are the least favourites in terms of experience and in
yeah.
terms of Gatland. And well, I don't know what he thinks of Dan, but I'd have probably had a look at him over the summer. But I think Dan. I think if it was me, I'd like to see Costello being given time away from the jersey. And I don't mean that in a, I think he's a bad player. I mean, I really do feel sorry for the guy. I think he had a horrific year in terms of injuries, in terms of coming back into bad teams continuously. And it seemed like it just was like a mallet hitting him over the head in a Looney Tunes fashion. It was just ridiculous. But this year, I think if you'd have asked me pre-Glasgow, I'd have probably said Sheedy, and now I'm not 100% sure. It's a really difficult one. I think Sheedy in attack offers a lot. In defence, it's questionable. I don't think you can turn to the other three and say they're brilliant in defence. I think Costy's probably the bravest, but has had the most injuries. Dan's decent in defence, and Johan's not too bad. But if you were to put a gun to my head and say which one I think Gatland's going to pick, I'd probably say Costello. But I would really like to see Costello be given time away from the jersey just to get back to playing good rugby and being back on form. I think it did him. His reaction in the final whistle, getting the win over Cardiff. As much as I didn't like to see it from a Cardiff perspective, it was great to see him celebrate as if it felt like a vindication for him. Like he'd come on, done his job, seen the game out, and done it what needed to be done. But yeah, if it was up to me, I'd pick Dan. But I think it's probably going to be Costello.
I think Dan Edwards does remind me of exactly the sort of like he just reminds me of young Dagenbigger. And I know he's going to get that comparison far too often, but there's just something about him where
He's
feels like,
composed.
he's got the composure. And he has no issue, despite basically being like fresh out of primary school. He's not afraid to start bossing forwards around and saying, "No, this is what I do." The balls to get that to go for that drop goal against Stormers. There's just something there that says to me he's probably got that test match mentality where maybe Costello doesn't quite have it yet. And I think I agree with you. I think Costello does need to be maybe just shied away from it, just to avoid having another Priestland, where basically the media and the fans are all on his back, and now we're in the social media age, even more so than Priest. It's going to get that little bit worse. Yeah, I do think Johan Lloyd is a very confusing thing for me because I feel like he should not work in any way, shape, or form but somehow gets away with it. And I mean that in the highest praise possible. But like some of the times when he just runs into traffic, you need to stop running into Oh, hang on, how? Because you're just so dirty. Like you can't actually tackle him low, so he bounces you. But yeah,
he's a beautiful rugby player to watch, though. I got to give it to him. He really is.
Yeah, great.
It both, I assume for coaches, infuriating and brilliant at the same time. He's got all the balance in the world, and he's got all the confidence in the world. And if I really wish you could inject what he's got into Costello in terms of confidence and trust, and similarly, she's got that confidence. She's got that. F it, I'm going to do it. You jump on my back and follow me, boys. And I just would love to see that just streamlined into Costello. That because I think he believes in himself, but not to the extent the other two do. The other two is like, I am the man.
I think that's one of the things they say about like you'll never make it as a 10 if you do not have like almost unashamed self-confidence. Levels that I know any mere mortal would be ashamed to have any moments of confidence like that. But I think for a 10, it's almost required. But I think part of the reason why Finn Russell's basically has always been in the conversation of one of the best 10s is because he also doesn't let mistakes bother him. Whereas I feel like sometimes with Costello and some other 10s we've got that have come through the Welsh system, one mistake just trickles and it gets worse and worse and worse. And I do think that sometimes happens with Costello, whereas I think Ewan Lloyd is a bit better at shrugging it off. Again, it just goes back to the self-confidence thing. Otherwise,
I'd say his bigger was like that younger. He could lose his head after having a shock early. Bigger could lose his head after having a shock early doors. So it's not by no means it's the end. I just really would like to see him taken out of the limelight. That's
definitely not saying someone could.
I thought, yeah.
I just think maybe we need to protect him as he sort of came. He's sort of that backup third choice 10, with too big experience, and then Ganscombe has another horrific injury. Bigger retires, and then he's sort of thrust into number one, and and then he gets injured, gets thrown back in when he's not quite fit and ready because we needed a 10. And I just said we were trying to keep this to Cardiff. I think we basically just discussed every Welsh qualified player at the moment. Have we got any other? I don't think there's many more Cardiff players to talk about in the Wales conversation, really.
Really outside, and it's simply because of the surprisingly suddenly lack of options on the wing is Hamer Webb as a really left field. I do think the probable is Blair Murray to fill that void. I do think it's probably going to be Grady, Rio, obviously, and Blair Murray. But if Grady's slotting in at 12, which he may do, there's an option. You probably need another winger alongside, and I do think Hamer Webb has an outside bet there. But it's probably a bit of a stretch maybe at the moment, given his game time more than anything.
Right. Dan, any last things as we are getting very steadily close to the 2-hour mark?
No, that was all my Cardiff players.
So I hope you feel that. I hope you all enjoyed listening to that. Probably far more in-depth chat than we initially planned on the Wales squad, and very little about that. The less said about that Scarlets game, the better. Thank you, Cowan. Thank you, Dan, for joining me, and thank you all for listening. Ta-ra.
That was the Cardiff Central Podcast. Please rate, review and share us on socials if you can, and join us again next week for more of the same. And until then, enjoy your rugby.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.